as far west in Yakima Valley as you can get, but the difference between our, east-west is not, anything, substantial. And so going east or going west doesn't necessarily make you colder or warmer. So you're going to end up in Walla Walla. Well, Walla Walla last night at my little, weather station was in the 30s. We were at 47 here. And the reason for the difference is we're high elevation and all that cold air rushes down valley and stays in the cooler side. So that is really important for us here because we have to be really mindful of the fact that you want to be off the valley floor. And so even with cherries, you don't want to be as deep in the valley floor as you are with apples because cherries blossom much earlier than apples do. And so you have to always be mindful of your crops. And so you still plant cherries where the soil is deep, but it can't be too shallow or else they're not going to produce because they're all about size, whereas we're all about flavor. So this excursion, we're going to show you 3 very distinct soil types and give you the flavor profile of each of the soil types. And again, because we have the hops guys and the citrus people, the cider people, is we have to be off the valley floor because grapevines do not like rich, moist soils. Hey, Susan.
I'm sorry, you said we're at 1,000 feet of elevation.
Property are planted to Cabernet Sauvignon. This is clone 47, which originated in Pauillac in Bordeaux. It tends to be a very small berried varietal, and what I love about it is that it retains all this great fruit flavors. You still have beautiful acidity. This is a blend of Cabernet from right here, right where you're standing, Cabernet Franc that we'll walk to and actually taste 100% Cabernet Franc next. It has a little bit of the Merlot that is down slightly deeper soils here, and a little bit of the Malbec that is over here. What's really fascinating about our property is that it is right at the convergence of Glacial Lake Missoula. So Glacial Lake Missoula, if you go, on your way to Walla Walla, have them point out Wallula Gap. Wallula Gap is where these huge glacial floods, from ice dams from well up in British Columbia, Idaho, and eastern Washington, they would dam up, and then they would give way. I've heard anywhere from 40 to maybe 200 times that they would build up and it would evacuate a volume that was sometimes as high as 5 times the volume of all the Great Lakes put together.
But would it get as high as like Mount Rainier?
So what would happen is it would hit the Wallula Gap at 1,250 feet was the high point. But the Wallula Gap is so tight in there, it would back into Yakima Valley to 1,150 feet, and everyone has their altimeter, right?
No.
So you don't have an altimeter in your phone? So we are
download that.
Really?
At
look at that.
We're at 12. Look at that, 1199. I was gonna say
1,200.
I chose this because it was 1,200 feet.
Take a step back.
I know. So we are clearly above the glacial flood. So we have a little bit of the silts here in this lush soil. But if you look behind me, and through your camera over there, that hillside is the subsoil above the glacial flood. So it's basalt, it's ancient rock. Those are 22 million years old, and where you have it fractured, you tend to have very, very shallow soils in here. We have purposely chosen to plant the Bordeaux varieties on this soil type. And so on this property we have the 4 of the 5 Bordeaux varieties, and then on the hillside over there, totally different soil. And then we've only planted Rhone varieties on that. So if you don't mind just walking down here, we have to walk through a little bit of this dusty, lush soil. Here stay warm at night. And as a result, you have maximum photosynthesis. So in the summertime at 6 o'clock in the morning, the sun's hitting. Well, the soil's already warm. You have more efficient photosynthesis when the soil is warm, and as a result, you have less of a day-night temperature swing as you would on Red Mountain. But we will ripen earlier, and I find that the wines just tend to be just a little less tannic and a little more textural. So if I were to if you were to ask me, well, how does your Cabernet Sauvignon differ from Red Mountain or even Walla Walla, you can see some really clear differences. And there's one reason why we wanted to bring your group here and show them what is unique here that maybe you're not going to experience in other parts of Washington. And there really is a diversity. I mean, there's a diversity within our own property. So let's try the Cabernet Franc again.
So would you liken this particular soil type here to a special area of Bordeaux?
That the soils are the most shallow, are planted to the latest ripening grape that we have, which is Cabernet Sauvignon. And then as you go down towards the winery, the deeper soils planted to Merlot. And the reason for that is Merlot is a big cluster grape variety. Let's go help yourself. This is 100% Cabernet Franc from these vines right here.
Nice.
So Merlot ripens early, and you want to grow it on deeper soils. And so we plant that to the bottom. And then as you climb the hill and the soils get more shallow, and in between where they're most shallow, we planted Cabernet Franc. Ripens later than than Merlot, but before Cabernet Sauvignon. And I love Cabernet Franc. It's a very ancient grape variety. It loves, kind of slightly cooler temperatures. And in a hot year that we just had, 2018, all those grapes weren't fully coloring up. And so we actually had to pluck some of the green berries out by hand.
So this is
It's a very finicky grape. I love it. I think it's an ancient grape variety. It predates Cabernet Sauvignon. And obviously it's one of the parents of Cabernet Sauvignon, so it's an ancient grape variety. What I love about Cabernet Franc from this end of the valley is that, we tend to be, at this elevation about 4 degrees cooler than we are in some of the other warmer sites during the day, but we're much warmer at night. So you get these gorgeous textures, but you also get to keep a little bit of that perfume in the grape. What vintage is this, Nacho?
This is 2015.
So this is the 15 vintage. So you had the 14 with the Bordeaux blend. It was very chunky, and it has a lot of tannin and richness. This is an even warmer vintage, and we had to go into the clusters, and we were, as I was saying, plucking those green berries out by hand. It was a lot of work. Don't you like that? Don't you like the tech? The first grape that we picked on the vineyard was Cabernet Franc. This year, one of the last grapes that we picked it this morning, was Cabernet Franc. So it's like it is wise into all grape variety. It knows when to preserve its energy. And so if it's really hot, it shuts its photosynthesis down. And if it's really cool, it just it's opened up for it. So
is this
I love
water
it.
coming from wells?
It is. We have a deep well. The well is pumping at about. The well itself is actually from a formation. It's an aquifer called the Ellensburg Formation aquifer. We'll actually see that soil type that it's named from, but it has to be slightly acidic. It's kind of interesting. So this is we have basic soils here and very depleted. I don't know if you were with me in the winery. We have to add even some nutrients to our fermentations because we have very low nitrogen levels in our wines, and so we have to amend that.
So one well will irrigate this entire vineyard?
It's amazing. Those cherries require as much as 10 times the amount of water that these do. So grapes are very drought hardy. They're pretty amazing. So we're going to go down 100 feet. And remember the level of Glacial Lake Missoula here was about 1150. So now we're actually in glacial soils, and so you'll have calcium carbonate. In fact, you saw that. See that rock right there? Just above you, next to that, there's that white. It's got that white substance on it.
Right.
Literally right at the level of Glacial Lake Missoula. And so in here you'll have some glacial silts, just a little deeper soils, but still a lot of rock and minerality. And again, I think it produces a finer wine than if you were to grow this in less and deeper soils. It tends to be, just a little more aromatic in texture. And that's what I always get at. This is the oldest soil type, as I was explaining, that we work with. This is called the Ellensburg Formation, and it's old Columbia riverbed. So basically predates Yakima River, and this actually predates the salt activity from behind you here. So these are anticlines that basically formed up through earth movement, and this was up-thrusted. So right where you're standing right now, you're almost at 1,200 feet. And so the glacial activity didn't occur here. So anything lower than this that wasn't up-thrusted was just washed away. So you'll only see Ellensburg Formation soils in high elevation vineyards in Yakima Valley. When you go to Walla Walla, you'll see the famous Rocks AVA, and it's all on riverbeds at the valley floor. What makes this really optimal for Grenache, for example, is Grenache is very cold sensitive, and so you want it on your highest part of the vineyard, so the cold air that settles will rush down. And so some of this is a little counterintuitive because here you are at one of the probably the highest elevation vineyards that you'll see on this tour, and yet it ripens early because again, that cold air rushes down. And what I love about this, it tends to, be very, we have Syrah grown on volcanic soils at Red Willow Vineyard. In fact, the owner of Red Willow is going to be here at dinner, and you get to meet him.
Oh, wonderful.
It is supposed to be, and that's what I love about this, is that it tends to be a little lighter on its feet, whereas the soils that are deeper tend to be just a little more textural and rugged. And we're going to taste one of my wines that is going to be deeper soil.
What about, did you just plant these vines recently?
So see these vines here? They're all the same age.
Really?
These vines here are about, how many? 5? 2014. So, from 14,
years.
15, 16, 17, 18, 5 years old.
Gotcha.
So they're really struggling in this soil type, if you can call that soil. But the reason why we planted this here is to get flavor and concentration.
Yeah.